Matthew Druckenmiller, who's on the Search Action Team, SIAT Action Team. And he, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, but is at University of Rutgers officially, but is located at the National Snow and Ice Data Center. So I'll let you get started.
Thanks, Walt. Hello, everyone. Again, Matthew Druckenmiller. I'm working closely with the Study of Environmental Arctic Change, SEARCH, specifically with the SEARCH SIAT Action Team. Over the next 10-15 minutes or so, I'll give an introduction to SEARCH, but more specifically to what the SIAT Action Team is focused on. In doing so, I'll provide some explanation and example of what I mean by knowledge exchange, and I will give a summary of the first SEARCH knowledge exchange workshop on the impacts of Arctic sea ice loss that was held last fall in Washington, D.C., and then end by talking about some of our upcoming plans. I'll start just by mentioning, for those who might be unfamiliar with SEARCH, SEARCH is a collaborative program of Arctic scientists, funding agencies, and other stakeholders that promotes original and collaborative research, synthesizes research findings, and aims to broadly communicate those results. SEARCH currently focuses on shrinking land ice, diminishing sea ice, and degrading permafrost through 3 action teams on those topics. So there's a sea ice action team, a land ice action team, and a permafrost action team, although there are other SEARCH activities that go beyond those action teams to address topics such as Arctic scenarios or coastal resilience, which I won't get into today, but wanted to highlight. So SEARCH is a program that is focused heavily on collaboration, so hopefully towards the end of this talk we can have some questions that may allow us to discuss ways in which others who do not immediately interact with SEARCH may find opportunity. So the SIAT Action Team's mission is to advance understanding and awareness of the impacts of Arctic sea ice loss by enabling collaboration, community engagement, and communication. So these 3 elements, I think, will come through in much of what I talk about this morning. The overall goals, as they've been kind of refined in the recent year or two, are to promote and enable research collaboration to develop synthesis products and to put together an accessible and very coherent source of information that communicates the societal implications of Arctic sea ice loss, and to begin to establish and sustain two-way communication between the research community and everyone else that comprises the Arctic community, from policymakers to decision makers, Arctic residents, stakeholders, and importantly, those within disciplines that might not immediately engage in Arctic science. So I'd like to just point out that the efforts of the SEARCH SIAT Action Team contribute to Research Objective 3.3 within the Arctic Research Plan, to support collaborative networks of researchers and stakeholders, including northern residents, to advance knowledge, understanding, and prediction of the sea ice system. And again, the action team is focused on synthesizing the science and communicating the results to broad audiences. Here I show the composition of the SIAT Action Team. So the action team is co-led by Jennifer Francis at Rutgers University and by Henry Huntington, who's in Anchorage with Huntington Consulting. And then I serve as the primary coordinator of the action team. But you can see here that we have several names that most of you will recognize. I'll point out that the action team is not only comprised of physical scientists, but also of those from social sciences, including Henry and Larry Hamilton. We also have Bob Henson with Weather Underground, who has a pretty unique background in science communication and blogging that builds on his expertise in climate and weather science. So as I use this phrase knowledge exchange, I wanted to provide one example from within search that gets at what we mean by knowledge exchange, or at least one kind of piece to it. And this is an effort that took place last summer in Washington, D.C. This was not an effort solely of the SIAT action team, but it was rather a search-wide effort led by Search's Executive Director, Brendan Kelly. And so we planned a series of events, one a congressional science briefing, and another a media roundtable at the National Press Club. And the goal was to communicate recent observations of change within the Arctic and present that in the context of a much longer time series. And so in preparing for these two events, we worked with scientists within Search, but also several from beyond Search, to put together a series of science briefs. These are 1 to 2 page concise documents that synthesize the science in a format that we hope is accessible to policymakers as well as those from the media or students. So these 7 briefs focus on Arctic sea ice loss and the role that plays in fueling Greenland melt, the permafrost coverage feedback, the effect of Arctic sea ice loss on U.S. weather patterns, the effect on coastal community resilience, and also on marine ecosystems. Walt Meyer was one of our presenters at both of these events. And I think really, in my mind, the benefit of this was not only the interaction that we were able to facilitate over these two events, but was really the learning experience for Search to see how much effort ahead of time and the groundwork that needs to be put in place to be able to do these types of events, to be able to produce this type of information in an efficient way that really draws upon the expertise of the community. And so I think the lessons from this event kind of extend into the future through much of what Search is aiming to do. For those of you that are interested, these science briefs are available on the Search website, and that address is shown there below. One of the things that we're doing to build upon this idea of making the science more available through briefs is the construction of knowledge pyramids. For those of you that attended the Search AGU Town Hall, you got an introduction to what we are trying to do within this concept. But essentially, we are putting together briefs that answer specific questions related to the implications of environmental change in the Arctic. And so those briefs, essentially, you can think of as residing at the apex of a pyramid. And below that brief is information that will be available to those who are interested in digging deeper into the science, digging deeper into the technical details, and perhaps have more time to engage with the material. And so as you go deeper, you access information that is more technical and in most cases more aligned with a particular discipline. And so these knowledge pyramids, we are developing these currently on 3 topics as kind of our demo knowledge pyramids, focused on the impacts to Arctic ecosystems, the impact on coastal communities, and the impact on lower latitude weather. Although this concept of developing knowledge pyramids is extending beyond the Sea Ice Action Team, and so there will be knowledge pyramids being produced by others within Search, for example, focusing on permafrost. The website that is hosting these knowledge pyramids is currently being revised to be less a product of the Sea Ice Action Team, but more a product of Search as a whole. So hopefully in the coming weeks that can be made available to you all. So next I'd like to shift and talk about this knowledge exchange workshop that we held last September in Washington, D.C. This was a 2-day event that drew from 30 plus participants coming from various areas. Certainly the physical and social sciences were represented. We also had participants from the federal agencies, from Arctic communities, from the media, those from AAAS that have a lot of experience engaging with policymakers, and some participation from the Union of Concerned Scientists. And the real focus was to exchange best practices and opportunities for communicating across the science community, but also directly with particular audiences, policymakers, the media, Arctic residents, and stakeholders in general. We use the concept of knowledge pyramids as a way to get people to think about a product that we could collaborate towards as a whole, and certainly developing collaboration was a key goal for this workshop. And specifically, we touched upon the three themes that I just mentioned: Arctic marine ecosystems, lower latitude weather, and human activities in the Bering, Chukchi, and Beaufort Seas. We started out with that kind of larger concept of human activities, but we really, during the workshop, focused on the impacts of Arctic sea ice loss and the information needs of coastal communities. So this slide, I apologize for the amount of information, but I wanted to at least summarize some of the discussions that happened within these three thematic areas. The discussions within marine ecosystems really touched upon the importance of communicating change in terms of rates and spatial scales, and the need to address key knowledge gaps, including achieving a better understanding of the bloom dynamics, a better understanding of the implications of ecological restructuring as we move from a pelagic dominated system to a, from a benthic to a pelagic dominated system, being able to identify ecological thresholds, who are the winners and losers of ecological change as a result of sea ice loss, and conversations also extended into discussing ocean acidification, which was a topic where those from the communities that participated were particularly interested. I think more as a result of not really knowing how that impacts them at the local scale. Within the discussions around lower latitude weather, interestingly, it had a much different kind of take on it than addressing ecosystems. There was really kind of an internal discussion amongst experts that work on this topic on the need to carefully consider the science challenges that they face in communicating the science, such as tying a single event to sea ice loss. There is a lot of public and media attention on this topic, and so there's a lot of opportunities for scientists to engage, and that engagement in recent years has led to a certain level of controversy, especially as the community deals with a lack of understanding as to how other experts within this field are really approaching and communicating their results. And so the discussions pointed towards the need for greater engagement amongst the experts, for example, through looking at model and intercomparisons. Addressing coastal communities, there again the discussion was very different. Of course, it pointed towards the need for kind of a sustained two-way communication, but those representing the community and those scientists who have had a lot of experience working in communities identified really the need for the science community to do a better job at communicating what its capabilities are, at what scales is the science that scientists often present relevant, and how does it connect to communities. Lastly, those with a lot of experience engaging with local peoples and communities express the desire to have discussions become much more sophisticated and identify the real challenges that communities face and point towards often the lack of consensus within a community. And so as one example, and I have a photo here at right of a slush berm on a beach in Barrow, there was discussion as to how slush berms are advantageous to communities in that they reduce coastal erosion in fall time, and slush berms often form much more effectively in shallow waters. But if you're a community that is considering relocation or looking at the advantages and disadvantages of dredging, you also have to account for the fact that shallow waters along the community are not very conducive for fishing locally. The community members often have to travel much further distance to access waters that allow them to access the fish that they seek to fish from their communities. Moving on, workshop also touched on some real practical approaches and tools for better communicating science, and the need for real stories and case studies around what is science for decision making. There was engagement in the long-standing challenge of scientists communicating what they know in terms of confidence as opposed to uncertainty. And I think it was acknowledged that climate science, perhaps more so than other science fields, are really challenged in this area. Those with particular experience in using message boxes, which is a way of kind of organizing elements of the communication message in a kind of a graphical form as a tool when you engage with the media, was highlighted as something that the Arctic community could do better, and potentially SEARCH could have a role in developing these types of message boxes as communication tools that are available to the community. And there was also suggestions that we have to do better at using social math to really explain the scale and the rate of Arctic change. And this figure here just provides an example of social math showing how Arctic sea ice loss in September really equates to an area equivalent to all the U.S. western states. We discussed to a large extent the role of collaboration and the need for collaboration, especially in a time where people are time limited and scientists often do not have the proper connections to communities to do the type of engagement that they might want to do. And so we've used this workshop as a way to begin to think about our sea ice action team in much broader terms. And so we are beginning to build beyond the team, which I showed on that first slide, which is 9 people, to be more of a collaborative network of scientists, but also people from the policy realm, from Arctic communities, those that operate in the Arctic, to be able to do a better and a more efficient job at engaging and synthesizing science in a way that is usable. And also we identified a network as being a way to gain authority and relevance as we communicate the science. So just to quickly identify some of our current and future plans, we are continuing to build the web-based knowledge pyramids on marine ecosystems, low latitude weather, and Arctic coastal communities. I think our recent efforts to put together science briefs have not necessarily been as specific in terms of addressing a very specific question as some have provided feedback saying that they need to be more specific. So I think we want to be doing more work to really identify specific questions with stakeholder input as to how sea ice impacts a whole range of topics ranging from local regional economies to food security in particular villages. We are beginning to develop a review paper on sea ice synthesis studies, which can be thought of as a synthesis of the syntheses, and again beginning to really establish the Sea Ice Action Network. Well, one of the things that we're doing there is soliciting short articles from those that may be interested in joining this network and putting them up on a blog that will be kind of a face of the Sea Ice Action Network on the web. Also, we are tentatively planning a second Search Knowledge Exchange workshop for next fall in Washington, D.C., probably at a similar scale with 30 so participants. This one, however, will be focused on producing very concrete communication products. And so at the end of the workshop, we'll actually have material to use or to share with very particular audiences. And since this focus will be on kind of producing products, we acknowledge that we need a lot of time ahead of time to engage stakeholders to really define the key questions that we will address through these communication products, and of course the proper time to work with the scientists that we identify as participants in this workshop to synthesize the science and put it in a format that is suitable for reaching the audience that they may want to reach. And again, this is an opportunity to build the Sea Ice Action Network that I had mentioned. I'll end with our website if you care to learn more about what the Sea Ice Action Team is doing. And here are our email addresses for the 2 leads, again, Jennifer Francis and Henry Huntington, and myself. Again, we see this as a collaborative process. And so I certainly welcome the chance to speak with anyone about how you might be able to contribute to what we're looking to do. So thank you very much for your attention.
All right. Thank you, Matt. It was a great presentation. Well, first, Kathy Geiger put in a request for the website shown, which I'm not sure if that's the one you're ending on. But we can leave that up there for now, and then if that's not the one she's looking for, can ask to put up the other one. But let me open it up for questions, either in the chat or if you can unmute and ask over the phone.
Walt, this is Renee Tatusco.
Yes,
can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hi, Matt. This is Renee Tatusco. I'm with the National Weather Service, Alaska Region Headquarters here in Anchorage. We'd very much like the opportunity to talk with you about engaging in this activity. We do have a sea ice program up here, and we are trying to work very closely with many of the coastal communities to provide them with additional information that will help them make the decisions they need to protect their lives and property. So I think this presents an interesting opportunity. I don't know if you have, so that's one. Number two, I don't know if you've had the opportunity to talk with Church Key at the Arctic Domain Awareness Center. It's part of the Department of Homeland Security Centers of Excellence located here at the University of Alaska Anchorage, but they do have an Arctic Information Fusion Capability project they're working on that includes a community-based observation network. So that presents an opportunity. And then the third point I'd like to make is that I'd also like to talk with you about the potential linkages to some of the international efforts that are taking place, such as the International Ice Chart Working Group. WMO is standing up a Pan-Arctic Polar Regional Climate Center, and one of their activities is to set up a communication and outreach initiative that I think really needs to link in with your activity. So I see a lot of good synergy taking place and would welcome the opportunity to chat with you further. Thanks very much.
Well, Renee, just quickly, certainly I would love to speak with you. All those things that you've mentioned I'm aware of, but I don't think with any of them there's any very specific thing that Search is working on them with. I could be wrong, especially as they may extend beyond the Sea Ice Action Team, but certainly within the Sea Ice Action Team, those would be great things to discuss with you. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Matt. So Kathy is asking the location of the briefs. Do you have the, Matt, can you scroll to the slide with the link for that near the beginning?
Or you could just type it into the chat box. That's a good way.
Or do that too.
Yeah, so I've moved to that slide, and I can also type this into the chat box.
Okay. Kathy, did you have a specific question on that, or did you just want to capture the website, the link? Okay. And any other questions? I had a quick question. So actually relating to these science briefs, like you said, that was beyond just sea ice. But I'm curious about any kind of other specific coordination between the Sea Ice Action Team and other action teams that are within CERT.
Well, so I ended by giving a preview of what our second workshop might look like. I didn't mention that we are also considering making this much more broader than the Sea Ice Action Team. And so essentially this workshop that we're describing could replicate the collaborative process that took place to develop those briefing materials for the congressional briefing and that media roundtable that I mentioned early on. And so that is an example of potentially where we will bring in people who might be much more interested in developing communication products around changes in Greenland or changes in permafrost.
Okay. Does that go beyond like the meeting or towards something more permanent, or is that still yet to be seen?
Well, I think that is there's certainly ongoing discussions about how search as a whole can streamline this process of bringing experts together to create this type of material that I've presented. I don't think we have that structure outlined yet, but certainly I think it is something that is on people's minds, and you might see a more formal process develop that gets at essentially the goals that were part of that Arctic Alerts event.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions for Matt? Nope. Okay. Well, thanks again for a great presentation. And so we'll next move on to the next